need that kid's coat. I hope the book you're reading is good.
Perfect. Thank you all. With that, then I call to order the March 14th, 2024 Louisville Planning Commission virtual meeting with a roll call, please.
Mr. Bangs,
There you go. Present.
Yeah.
Unmute.
Commissioner Basket,
Did you call me?
yes.
Sorry,
Sorry.
here, present.
Commissioner Choi,
Here.
Commissioner Hunt,
Here.
Commissioner Mahaley,
Present.
Commissioner Moline,
Here.
Chair Brown Eyes.
Here, thank you. A motion to approve this evening's agenda. I see Commissioner Basket is not muted. How about you move?
I move the approval of tonight's agenda.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
There we go, Commissioner Mahaley, thank you. And then motion to, do we have any corrections for last month's minutes? For the February 2024 minutes, any corrections? Commissioner Mahaley?
Yes, on page 3, this is I think correcting Mr. Zuccaro's answer to what the new code would apply to. The notes have it as renovations that add more than 2,500 square feet. I thought the rule was any renovations that add 25% more area. So
That's correct.
and so that is, I believe that is incorrect then in the notes, unless the subject property happened to be, exactly 10,000 square feet. But I think in general, I think that should be corrected to adequately reflect the rule.
Very nice catch. Thank
Nice
you.
attention to detail, John.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm not trying to be pedantic, but I think that
no, that's an important one.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Other than that, I'm
All
good.
right. Anybody else corrections? Seeing none, a motion to approve the February.
move.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunt with the motion,
Second.
Commissioner Moline with the second. Roll call, please. And we just lost Commissioner Basket, unfortunately.
Well, Commissioner Bangs,
Yay.
Commissioner Choi,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahaley,
Yes.
Commissioner Moline,
Yes.
Commissioner Basket,
I'm seeing her video is frozen right now. We can double check back in with her. There we go.
I'm back.
Okay, do you move, so we have the motion to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Yes,
approved.
okay, thank you.
and Chair Brown Eyes.
Yes, thank you. All right. Then do we have anybody who wanted to speak public comment for items not on the agenda? We'll bounce over here. If there's anybody who wanted to speak to items that are not on the agenda, please use raise hand. I don't see.
We do have one.
Oh, we do have one
One toucher.
attendee. Mr. Parcher?
Yes.
If you would to speak to an item that's not on this evening's agenda,
Yes.
we would welcome you with, if you can state your name and your city of residence, and if you would please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes. Don Parcher, Louisville, 378 Grouse Court. I'd like to take 30 seconds to ask that in all matters you consider, you do what you can to help fight climate change and fight the loss of biodiversity, because I believe that with climate change, we are probably past the point of no return for saving life on Earth. And experts say the loss of biodiversity is so great that for human civilization to last past the next 100 years, we need to reduce through birth control Earth's population from 8 billion to under 1 billion, and we need to set aside half of Earth to let biodiversity recover. Thank you very much.
You're muted, Steve.
Okay, sorry about that. I see we have a couple additional attendees, but no raised hands at this time. So if you are participating remotely and you want to, when you want to speak, please use raise hand function. With that, then we will move into our first item of business this evening. I'll now open the public hearing. Excuse me, a request for altering the municipal code. Resolution 2, Series 2024, recommending that the city council approve an ordinance or not, amending Title 16 and Title 17 of the Louisville Municipal Code to revise the expedited PUD process, minor subdivision procedures, and subdivision definitions. The purpose of the hearing is to receive evidence regarding the application materials and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on this request before the Planning Commission. The procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. First, there'll be a presentation and testimony by city staff, followed by questions from the Planning Commission to staff. After this presentation, members of the public who have joined this meeting in person, by computer or telephone may speak regarding the application. Anyone who would like to speak in person is asked to, well, we're not in person. Use the raise hand function if you're participating in Zoom, or *9 if calling in by telephone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. 2 people present at the meeting may pool their minutes to allow 1 person to speak for up to a total of 6 minutes. The purpose of public comment is to receive public testimony and not a forum for debate or dialogue. Commenters are encouraged to raise pertinent issues and may ask questions for clarity. However, these questions will not be directly answered during the public comment period. The staff will then be allowed to make a closing statement. I will then close the public hearing, and no further testimony or other evidence will be received unless the commission decides to reopen the hearing. The Planning Commission will discuss the matter, may approve with conditions, deny, or continue to a future meeting. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. All testimony must be presented after stating your full name and city of residence. Does anyone participating object to the procedure I've described? Seeing none. Do we have notification, please?
Yes, notice has been satisfied.
Thank you. And do any planning commission members have any disclosures regarding this? Seeing none. Thank you. And I'm not actually sure who is presenting on this. Is that you, Mr. Post?
It is, yes. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Matt Post. I'm a new planner here in the planning division at the city of Louisville. And Jeff or Ben, can you guys give me sharing permissions, please? Whoever has that?
Yeah.
For
We'll get on that.
those permissions to come up here, and I'll get the.
Should work now.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, well, again, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Matt Post, new senior planner here at the city of Louisville. I'll be presenting a draft ordinance this evening to amend the zoning code, the subdivision code, and to update the expedited PUD process, minor subdivision thresholds, and subdivision definitions. All public notice requirements have been met. Those commissioners who were seated at the time will recall that staff presented a version of this draft ordinance in December of 2023. I do believe that the Planning Commission at the time had recommended approval of that particular draft ordinance to the City Council that evening. In between the Planning Commission hearing and scheduling a City Council hearing, staff were in a position to apply the draft ordinance and provide process feedback to applicants in response to a pre-application request. Pre-applications are an opportunity for an applicant to meet with the city development team and discuss development proposals and procedural requirements. In preparing to administer the previous version of the draft ordinance via the pre-application response, staff had determined that additional updates were necessary to further align the subdivision plat process with the intent of the expedited PUD process and to ensure that there were no conflicting provisions present in either the zoning code and the subdivision code. The update as proposed will expand the number and types of projects that would be eligible for expedited PUD and final plat review. Moving on to some quick background, here is a reminder of just what a PUD is. It is a site development plan with site-specific zoning standards. All commercial, industrial, and residential development of more than 6 dwelling units or multifamily requires a PUD prior to building permit application. At the moment and under the current process, most PUDs require 4 public hearings. One before Planning Commission and City Council with a preliminary PUD, and then another before Planning Commission and City Council with a final PUD. Once they've received final approval, the applicant may move on to the building permit submittal and review process. The current expedited PUD process allows for some PUDs to go straight to final PUD, which only requires 2 public hearings instead of 4, but projects that are eligible for the current expedited process are very limited. Continuing on with background and adding to our subdivision amendment proposal, if a subdivision is necessary, the review of that subdivision shall occur simultaneously with the review of a PUD. At the moment, and again under the current process, most plats also require 4 public hearings before receiving final approval and the go-ahead to record those plats. And most plats are reviewed with PUDs or in conjunction with PUDs. The current minor subdivision process allows for some plats to go straight to final plat, requiring only 2 public hearings instead of 4. But again, eligible projects are limited in scope and scale due to the current minor subdivision thresholds. So the purpose of the proposal is to, that staff would like to present, is to recognize that most PUDs and subdivision plats and applications can be adequately evaluated against adopted policies and development regulations in the final PUD and final plat review process. Just as a quick note, before staff can bring a case to the Planning Commission for consideration and recommendation to the City Council, a PUD and a plat must satisfy all review criteria and development policies, the zoning code, subdivision code, applicable design guidelines, applicable elements of the engineering design standards and guidelines, and also addressing referral agency comments, such as Louisville Fire Protection District, CDOT, RTD, and Boulder Valley Schools, among others. So by allowing broader access to the expedited PUD process and relying on the accurate administration of development policies and reducing the public hearing requirement from 4 hearings to 2 hearings for eligible projects, we anticipate a reduction in redundancies in the current land use review process and a more balanced caseload for staff to better serve our community and stakeholders. So some highlights of the proposed ordinance. The actual language of the ordinance is in your packet, but some of the highlights of the zoning code update include maintaining the current size threshold of 7 acres to be eligible for an expedited PUD, and that the property had been previously subdivided. I think Planning Manager Jeff Hurd had expanded on this during the previous presentation, but we weren't necessarily able to find a connection to the 7-acre threshold and the expedited PUD process. So we've opted to maintain that particular standard. We're also proposing to eliminate the requirement that the PUD be in an approved general development plan, which is a specific type of zoning. It's very geographically limiting for the expedited PUD process, as there are not many GDPs in the city outside of the McCaslin corridor, the north side of CTC, and some areas along South Boulder Road. We've also recommended eliminating that the expedited PUDs are limited to 1 land use and 1 building. In addition, we are adding that in order to be eligible for an expedited PUD, that any subdivision as part of the PUD must be within the minor subdivision thresholds. Part of the larger change that we're proposing tonight when compared to the previous version of the draft ordinance will be a change to those minor subdivision threshold procedures. So continuing on with the proposal, again, actual language is in your packets, but some of the highlights of the subdivision code update include amending one of the thresholds for minor subdivisions to expand the number of projects that would be eligible to go straight to final plat, excuse me. A project eligible for minor subdivision is eligible for final plat. Otherwise, it would have to go through the prelim plat process. And so this would include removing language relating to density, number of lots, and extent and location of site improvements. The reason that staff are proposing to remove this language is due in part to the fact that density is not established by a plat, but rather is limited by applicable zoning regulations. Further, the number of lots don't necessarily correspond to the density that could be established on a site because, again, density is limited on a site by zoning, site size, and design regulations. A quick real world example of that would be, for example, a 2-acre lot that would be eligible to establish a multifamily dwelling. That could be built and platted on one lot. That same lot could potentially be eligible for 10 townhouse units with the fee simple sale of those units reflected on a plat. On paper, you would see 10 units on a plat that would appear to be a more dense project when in reality an adjacent plat or the same plat with a multifamily project would only have one lot that would actually be eligible to establish a multifamily dwelling, say for example purposes up to 40 or 50 units. So again, the idea there is just to ensure that we're aligning real world development practices with what our ordinance says. We're also proposing to remove language that references a material change to the extent and location of site improvements and details like easements, public improvements, and open space areas. The reason for this recommendation is that when a site develops or redevelops the location of wet and dry utility easements, public access easements, public improvements, emergency vehicle access easements, open spaces, and other improvement details is more often than not dictated by proposed building layout and applicable zoning and engineering regulations. So changing easement locations and site improvement details is a very common practice and very common occurrence with new and infill development. So part of the purpose of this update, again, is to ensure that our subdivision standards align with the reality of development patterns and proposals. We're also proposing to amend the definition of planned unit development as it's defined in the subdivision code. Currently, the definition of planned unit development includes language that states that a preliminary plat and a final plat are required with all PUDs. Again, this is just a cleanup item to ensure that we don't have any conflicting provisions present in either the zoning code or the subdivision code. Moving on, we want to reiterate that expedited PUDs and final plats as presented in the draft ordinance still require public hearings before the Planning Commission and the City Council. The only major difference is that there would be 2 public hearings instead of 4 as are currently required. And so we'll cover scenarios here quickly. I think this is an important piece so that the Planning Commission is aware of what projects may be eligible for expedited PUD and plat review or this draft ordinance to move forward. So the first one is a commercial building with 2 tenant spaces on one property. This was presented again by Jeff Hurd, our planning manager previously. A project like that would very, very likely be eligible for expedited PUD review and final plat review as eligible under a minor subdivision. We use the term likely because the minor subdivision language that we're proposing to remove does take some review and potentially some discretionary application of exactly what is considered a material change. And again, that language is in the ordinance. Happy to talk about that further if necessary. So that first item, that first scenario would likely be eligible. Again, I think the planning commissioners are aware that also just a single building on a single lot would be eligible. I think the big change comes with number 2 or the second scenario, and that would be a multiple building mixed use development. Could be residential or commercial, again, a mixed use that has been previously subdivided and is less than 7 acres in size. We would find that likely that would be eligible, a project like that would be eligible to go directly to final PUD and final plat review under the proposed revisions. Moving to the third scenario, there are a multi-building mixed-use industrial or commercial project on a site that is greater than 7 acres in size that has been previously subdivided or not would not be eligible. Again, that 7 acre threshold there would be the major trigger. And so with that, staff would recommend approval of Resolution 2, Series 2024, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the commissioners may have.
Thank you for the presentation. With that, open it up to commissioner questions. You can, okay. Commissioner Bangs, go ahead.
Yeah, simple question. I understand the benefits of streamlining the process. I guess I'm asking for some feedback from the planning folks on how onerous was it or is it for them to prep for 4 instead of 2? And typically, what changed from the first hearing to the second hearing in front of, for example, the planning commission? Were there typically significant changes, or was the second more typically a rubber stamp of the first? That's what I'm curious to understand.
Yeah, I think I'd answer the first part of your question, Commissioner, would be I guess is more related to the burden that staff may have with preparing for 4 public hearings as opposed to 2. Obviously, as the commissioners are aware, we have 15-day notice requirements and staff reports that would need to be generated for each case type. That would generally equate to 1 to 2 months of additional time. I think the big draw there is when we're looking at a preliminary PUD or a preliminary plat, we're doing a review of those items. In a lot of instances, applicants understand that they have to go through 2 processes, so they're not necessarily giving us the level of information that we would need to actually complete a review. And so we're doing this preliminary review, spending referral time on it, staff time on it, making a recommendation, taking that to Planning Commission and City Council. Following Planning Commission and City Council hearings, we're doing the same thing again with the final plat, when the truth of the matter is maybe not a lot has changed between those 2 items, and or the applicant could have decided to invest more time after knowing that they got the preliminary PUD approval. So I'm relatively new on staff, and so if Director Zaccaro or Planning Manager Jeff Hurt want to hop in and add a little flavor to that, I would welcome that. But I would say that, it significantly extends review time, but then also adds significantly to staff caseloads as well. As far as the major change there is concerned, I would have to say that I think it is a relatively significant change, and that a significantly larger scale and scope of projects at this point will now be eligible, assuming this draft ordinance were to move forward to move into the final plat and final PUD process. But again, I think, what staff wants to be sure that we communicate is that, with our adopted development policies and regulations and processes, we feel confident that we can provide the Planning Commission and the City Council with a PUD that meets review criteria and or is relatively close to meeting review criteria, I guess, in most circumstances. And we can do a thorough review on those final PUDs without having to do the preliminary process in most circumstances.
And I would let me just add a little context to that, since I have a little bit more background. I think from the staff's point of view, there's not a lot of additional work to be done from the actual planning documents. Oftentimes they are kind of rubber stamping between preliminary and final, so it's a lot of extra process for not a lot of bang for the buck. When it comes to plats, the real big difference is really construction documents on public infrastructure. Otherwise, we expect them to be substantially the same. PUDs as well. Really, I think the preliminary PUD gives the applicant an opportunity to kind of invest less. And we still, with this ordinance, I think we still give them that opportunity. They could still choose to do the preliminary, I think is how we drafted it, if they don't want to invest in construction documents, but we don't make them. And so, we don't feel like there's a lot of value added, and the plans typically are substantially, if not exactly the same as you saw in preliminary.
Thank you both. Commissioner Bangs, did you have any follow on to that?
No, I think that, yeah, that answers my question. I guess that it's higher stakes in terms of a one and done approach for the applicant in particular. So they're going to have to be better prepared if they are seeking approval, is my takeaway from that.
Yeah, and I think an applicant who knows they have a lot of policy alignment are probably going to be willing to take the risk. An applicant who has a lot of waivers and maybe isn't certain that they have a lot of policy alignment, they can still do the preliminary and get that initial feedback without doing full final plans.
So are we giving applicants the choice to do a preliminary and a final? And
Yeah.
not, okay, so
Yeah, we would-
expedited is at their request.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Basket.
Yes, thank you. You quickly passed over the 7-acre threshold. We don't know where that came from?
Yeah, we don't. I took a look into that too. Commissioner Basket, I wasn't able to find any details on it. I know I did plug into the previous commission hearing, and I believe that the Director Zaccaro and Jeff Hurd would tell you the same thing. So we're not sure where that came from.
And is that relevant to some other measure?
It's interesting. I would say that typically a 7-acre site, and from a development perspective, would have significantly more improvement requirements associated with it that could potentially impact street connections and public improvements and things of that nature. So it is logical that a site larger than 7 acres would require additional preliminary review. I mean, for example, it would be beneficial to look at a preliminary plat on a 7-acre site to show that street connections can work, that the lots that are being created are actually developable lots. So it could have something to do with that, but that's pure speculation on my part. So
Thank you.
Commissioner Mahaley.
So this might be related to the 7-acre threshold, and maybe we could use that as a knob here, but could you give us some context? And I know you don't know for sure what number of applications will come through if this passes, but in the past 5 years, what percentage of applications would this have been actually applicable to? Because we talk about wanting to, free up staff loading, and free up bandwidth. Would the current set of criteria actually have made a dent in years past?
I think I'll let Director Zaccaro answer that one, just because I'm relatively new on staff.
So I think another part of this that we probably haven't talked about is there are a lot of applications we have taken directly to final PUD. So we're also aligning our code with how we've been treating a lot of applications. I think that, and I think your question was workload for staff, if I got that correct. So I do think a couple things, this will help staff have more clear conversations with applicants and give them a clear roadmap on what they actually have to do, make that consistent with code. I think it will reduce staff workload fairly significantly, especially on certain cases.
So has the 7-acre threshold been considered as a knob to turn up or turn down based on the volume of applications we're seeing of a given size?
Yeah, sorry about, I didn't catch that. So that's the 7-acre threshold. I haven't seen, where that's put us into one category or another. We just haven't had a lot of developments that are over 7 acres. The vast majority of the developments that I've seen here at the city over 8 years have all been less than 7 acres, save for probably the Red Tail development that I can think of off the top of my head. Everything else is below that 7-acre threshold. I did notice, and again, this is just anecdotal, is that if you look at big box properties on McCaslin, they're all over 7 acres. So there may have been some intent to look at those types of developments and the potential impact on the city and say those may need some additional review, but that's just speculation.
Thank you. And you actually answered my next question, which was, properties like McCaslin or your typical commercial plat, well, what size is that? And it seems like most of these would qualify for that, or not qualify rather.
Right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hunt.
my primary question was, I think answered by Commissioner Bangs's questions. So I don't have a whole lot to add there, but, is it my understanding that the extra process is really, I mean, is that really for the benefit of the developers, or is that for the benefit of the city to be able to analyze, or I guess a little bit of both?
Yeah, I would say that my interpretation of the code would be that it was originally intended to be a benefit to the city. I think to exact the type of development patterns that we wanted to see. I do think, again, based on, and I reiterate, or I spoke to this in my presentation, that, staff are in a position to adequately evaluate these proposals without that preliminary process. I think at this point, and I think, Director Zaccaro indicated this, is that it's probably more likely become more beneficial to applicants because they don't have to invest in those final construction documents, which we talked about would be required with the final plat. That's how we put together our subdivision agreements, our developer agreements. We need those concrete numbers that come with construction documents. So it actually allows them to not invest what they need to. And I believe one of the commissioners has said this previously, it'll if this ordinance gets adopted, it'll put more pressure on the applicants to make sure that they get us a proper set and submittal the first time around. They'll have to invest in that.
If they want to, but they can, if they want to, go through the other process.
Correct.
Yeah. And there are probably could be some good reasons to still do preliminary. There's pros and cons to all of this. And one of the cons potentially is when an applicant does go through the full investment of a final, they're probably less likely to be willing to make changes. So if they get in the hearing process and there's comments from the planning commission or city council that would require changes to their plans, they may be more reluctant to kind of go back to the drawing board. So that could be a potential con to doing it this way.
Okay. And then the only other question I had, I appreciate all the work that I wasn't here in December. I appreciate all the work you all have done to try to make sure everything's harmonized and get rid of any conflicts. Just as a matter of practice, this may be a dumb question, but do you all have the city attorney kind of look through this with the code to sort of make sure there's not any unintended consequences that you all haven't found?
Yeah, we didn't send this one to the attorney. We did, however, review it as a staff, and we actually pulled back. I can tell you this, Commissioner Hanna, some of the recommendations we had to ensure that we weren't generating any scope creep, and then also generating on any unintended consequence. So
okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Choi.
Thanks, Chair. I just had one question, and Director Zaccaro, I apologize if we talked about this last time and I just don't remember what it was, but the language is still in the draft ordinance, and there's a statement in it that says the director determines the application will not result in a material change in the extent, location, or type of public improvements, easements, arrangement of streets, open space, or utilities. Can we define material, and how do you make that call? What is and what isn't?
So we took that language out of the PUD, but it remained in the plat language, if I recall correctly. Is that right, Matt?
Well, it's actually, Commissioner Choi, we may have to update the ordinance draft that you're reading because the intent was to take out density language, lot language, and then extent and location. And I caught that this afternoon.
Okay.
So yeah, but yeah, it does provide broad discretionary action. Well, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. So yeah, we want to take out density and some of the other language. And the idea is that with subdivisions, you're not determining density and some other things as well. And the idea is that we've talked a lot the last couple months about what does material change mean and whether we want to define it. And I think we're comfortable applying the code as written. And I think to try to explain what we think it means is if you have a subdivision plat and you've got, let's say, a sewer main easement running through it. If you're gonna have a minor plat, there's a really good chance the location of that sewer main is gonna change, but it doesn't say any change to the location of an easement. It says a material change. So I think we have broad discretion to say, well, that easement's moving 5 feet to the north. That's not a material change, but to come in and say, well, now we have to have, a new big stormwater easement that maybe didn't exist before, and that could have an impact on adjoining properties. We'd say that's a material change. So we like the idea of just having flexibility. Material change doesn't mean any change. It means some change that's kind of influencing, that has some influence that we need to consider or the public needs to consider.
Thanks. So is it safe to say that if a project were to meet the criteria on the face of what this would be, that the first step would be a staff review, kind of a recommendation to you, and your final determination as to whether or not that option would be provided to the applicant?
Yeah, so yeah, probably what would happen, the way we do development review now, we do pre-application meetings with the applicant where we kind of solidify the process. So this would probably most often come up in a pre-application review, and we could make a determination and give applicant direction at that time.
And if I may, Commissioner Choi, that is why I brought up the pre-application process in the here or in the presentation, just in anticipation that would be our opportunity to identify those items and then address whether or not, you know, a project was eligible to go to expedited review. That would occur in the pre-application stage.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
As a point of clarification regarding that, though, is the language as proposed appropriate, or do we need to have a condition to address this?
Yeah, let me pull that up. I just noticed this too. And let me get it up here. I apologize. There is, so I just closed it down. Sorry, bear with me. So the draft ordinance, as it is written, and I believe what Commissioner Choi read. Give it here, expedite ordinance. States, and this is 1728-250B. And this is one of the additions that staff had recommended to add to the expedited PUD process. And this is making a project eligible for the minor subdivision. And so essentially what we tried to do there was that language originally in Title 17 in the expedited PUD process originally exactly mirrored the minor subdivision threshold language. And so when we went to update the minor subdivision threshold language, we also needed to update this language. So this would be appropriate for a condition specifically to reflect the language that's being changed in the minor subdivision threshold. So right now, what it says in the ordinance, in the draft ordinance, is the director determines the application will not result in a material change in the extent, location, or type of public improvements. We need to remove extent and location. That was the proposal. And so in order for those to align, that would need to be removed from the draft ordinance: extent, location, and or.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Moline, did you have questions at this time too, or? Oops, yeah.
Yep, sorry about that. So I think most of my questions have been answered, although the last comment threw me just for a second, because just so I understand, so that we're adding some language at B3, 1728-250 B3, but we want to take out extent, location. Is that right in that?
That's correct, Commissioner Moline. But the addition of that language mirrors the language of the minor subdivision procedure that we're also amending. So if you reference the staff report, so that was an oversight on my part. I apologize that I should have removed that language in item B3 as well to reflect what the proposed change to the minor subdivision thresholds are.
Got it. And I see that in 1612-110 C2, we've stricken that as you were explained in your presentation, we've stricken that language about increase in density and extent and location. Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I had a minor question. I was just looking for a little bit more explanation regarding removing the language that refers to subject to covenants addressing use and development of the property. I think it was one of the bullet points. So of course, these properties are still subject to these covenants. It seemed to say it was just trying to clean it up. What was the nature of that?
Yeah, I think that the covenants of record addressing the use and development of the property. I think I'll let Jeff talk on that one a little bit, Jeff, if you can, or Rob. I think it was a bit of a nebulous concept. We do that essentially just an attempt to clean up the process to ensure that it was that more projects were eligible. Rob, can you expand on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the things as I understand it was basically saying the property needed to be subject to covenants to private covenants in order to be eligible for this process. And certainly the city, does not and should not be involved in overseeing private covenants in any way for the most part. So I think that was just one thing where we had a lot of commercial properties that it's really hard or impossible to verify if there are covenants or effective covenants. That was probably at the time when that was drafted, it probably made a lot of sense to the city, but it's not something that I think in our mind influences whether a project's a good candidate or a bad candidate for an expedited PUD.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that background. Any additional questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, I would like to now open it up for public comment. If you'd like to speak, please limit yourself to 3 minutes and begin with stating your name and city of residence. I see Ms. Krantz.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thanks for taking my comment. And I want to say I still appreciate the chance to engage with all of you and hear new voices on the commission with great questions. And welcome Senior Planner Post, and thanks for making it into your office. I could tell by your background. I have 2 objections or concerns to the current proposal that I hope you'll consider. I really love the objective of getting rid of cumbersome processes for applicants or extra workload for staff. But I'm wondering why this is needed when our attorney has already determined that preliminary and final plats can be heard at the same time. I appreciate that you've cleaned up all the areas of the code to make sure there's no unintended consequences, but I just wanted to ask you, just in case, you didn't mention it, but you probably did this already, but did you evaluate the preliminary and final requirements? Because they do differ, to make sure that nothing is lost that's only in the preliminary requirements. I also wanted to mention, I think that there's one drawback to this, and that is that it takes away opportunities for public engagement because there will be less hearing. I'm thinking in particular of the PUD for the East Street development. There were several waivers requested, and the staff would work really heavily with the applicant in the pre-application process. But when there's a second hearing for that, because we heard their preliminary PUD, that's going to give the applicant the opportunity to fine tune their proposal with commissioner and council comments in mind. And it also gives you, as the planning commission, a chance to look at large proposals after they come back from city council, as council may have different concerns. And I think an alternative idea that you might consider is allowing this expedited process to more applicants, provided that those applicants are not requesting waivers or modifications. And second, I object to the change under 1728-250B3, which gives the director too much discretion. It says the director determines the application will not result in a material change. I think it's great that you asked what would be the definition of, Commissioner Toy asked, what would be the definition of material? I think you could do more to define it, just as Director Sakaro said, by saying that material might mean moving the stormwater greater than X feet or requiring a new drainage easement. It would also be preferable, just to define what the word material means. Thanks for taking my comment. I think that it's great to reduce the burden on staff, but I think overall this is going to make it harder for the public to engage especially as there's a lot of considerations for new housing and mixed use developments coming up. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Ms. Smith.
Hi, am I connected?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about 1728-250B and tonight's conversation about what that means. I honestly did not follow the conversation in its entirety. And so I hope you all are clear on what's before you. As written, the language says that if the director determines that the application will not result in a material change in the extent, location, or type of public improvements, etc. And you're talking about, if I understand correctly, removing extent and location. But when asked what material meant, Rob gave an example of where what I would understand it would be the location, because he was talking about moving something 5 feet. So I don't know whether I just am not following what's happening here. But I do think that, at least from my point of view, I'm just not clear on what you're doing or what the proposal before you is. And because of that, I also just would ask the question about, if you're changing what you sent to the public in a material way, which I think you are probably, do you need to renotice this to the public so that they are commenting on what is actually being considered by the Planning Commission? Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other raised hands at this time. If we have additional questions for staff before we invite a closing statement from them, any additional questions from commissioners to staff regarding any of these issues? Seeing none. I guess I would, does staff wish to address anything that was raised by public comment or provide any additional information for the Planning Commission to consider in a closing statement?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address a couple items from public comment. I think Tamara brought up prelim versus final plat requirements, and that both those processes have different requirements. I would say that staff are aware of that, and those two processes build off one another. And so the requirements that are present for a preliminary plat are also baseline requirements for a final plat. So I don't believe that there's any that there would be any opportunity that we as staff and the general public and the Planning Commission would miss something that would otherwise be required on a preliminary plat. Again, that final plat is that next stage. I do just also want to say I think Tamar brought up a valid point about the lack of public engagement. I do just want to remind the Planning Commission and the general public that we did just recently adopt the concept plan process as well, which is an optional process for applicants to go in front of the city council. Unfortunately, they don't go to the Planning Commission, but to go to the city council to receive preliminary non-binding feedback from both city council and the general public. And then I do want to comment on the clarity on the extent and location piece as we're moving that. I know Rob had mentioned that moving a sewer easement would not necessarily result in a material change. I think that's exactly why we are proposing that extent and location be removed from that language. And again, that's a comment of redevelopment to reestablish easements and then meet zoning code requirements. So I'm not sure if that clarifies the commenter's question at all, but that's all I have.
And I would just add that this is really about PUDs. The preliminary and final plat regulations are still there. And a brand new unsubdivided property, I think, still goes through those processes. This is an issue of currently subdivided property. And if you're having a minor subdivision, you're already subdivided. And so there's a difference between those issues. So if you have a completely unsubdivided property, I think you're still going to have to go through that preliminary and final. But Matt, can you confirm that? I'm going to pull up the language because I think that's a good point, that we don't necessarily want to change those requirements for major projects.
Yeah, but Rob, was the question there if unsubdivided still have to go through preliminary and final?
Yes.
Yes, that's absolutely right. If the property is unsubdivided, it would have to go through preliminary and final. That's correct.
Yeah.
One of the conditions is it has to be previously subdivided.
Yes, thank you for confirming. I was 99% sure, but I know there's been a lot of changes, so I wanted to make sure.
Great, thank you both. Is there any additional closing statement staff would like to make?
No.
No.
Thank you. I will now close the public hearing, and the planning commissioners will deliberate on the evidence presented. During deliberations, no further public comment or other testimony or evidence will be received. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Choi, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I won't take too much time. I'll sum it up. I think that reducing the overall duplicative steps that are frequently, part of the applicant's process for getting anything through either a PUD or a plat application. Reducing some of that unnecessary redundancy is good, and I'm in support of streamlining the process. I do appreciate that during the pre-application and at the director's discretion, there are multiple off-ramps from this mechanism where staff does a good job of identifying really what's best in terms of evaluating all of the nuances of an application. And we have to rely very significantly on the expertise and capabilities of staff to be able to make those determinations and those presentations. And in doing so, we still have the opportunity to look at.
Oops, Commissioner Choi, somehow you just got there.
Sorry. Yeah, we still have the opportunity to look at these process flows as they come through, both at Planning Commission and City Council. So all that being said, with the modification to the draft ordinance language to remove the extent, location, or type words from that section of 1728-250B3, I'm in support of this.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Basket.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also in support of the revisions to this ordinance. I think that there's been a lot of discussion over the past couple of years about streamlining and being more business friendly. And I think this gives the applicants options for how they want to proceed. And I think that staff will be able to catch anything that is out of the ordinary to bring to our attention or modify so that we make sure we have adequate time for review of any proposals that are coming forward. So I will be supporting this recommendation by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs.
Yeah, I'm inclined to support the motion. Obviously, we're reliant on the planning director's discretion to guide this, and I presume he'll be sensitive to the interest in more public comments. So we'll deny an expedited process if he feels like there's value in 2 hearings for planning and 2 hearings for city council. I don't know whether we answered the public comment question about the need to renotice this given the wording change. So do we need to do that at all, given the adjustment?
No, we can offer those conditions as needed, but Director Zakara, yeah, if you wanted to chime in, that's great.
No, I was just gonna say that too. I think oftentimes there are there's amendments as the ordinance continues on through city council. So yeah, it's okay to make conditions and change the wording or the ordinance. If there is a very substantial change, you can request that it go back out for hearing if you want as a commission, but it is not necessary.
Okay, and then just the other comment I made, Rob, you, I presume, would have the discretion to deny an expedited process if you felt more hearing was necessary.
I think when it comes to, I think the discretion that we have is if there's changes in the plat. So if they are platting also, and Matt chime in too, because you're a lot more familiar with the final language. But my understanding is if they qualify on the face of the code, then they qualify. There's actually no override unless they get to the point where they're changing the plat, and then there's the discretionary determination about material changes to the plat. But Matt, if there's other language left, please let everybody know.
No, that's right, Rob. The discretionary approval would come at a replat stage if we determine there's a material change. Otherwise, uses and so on and so forth would be reviewed in accordance with the zoning ordinance and design guidelines.
Yeah, and I would say, Commissioner Bangs, we did look at other cities' ordinances that have similar authority where they really just leave it up to the planning director to determine if there's some interest. We decided not to go that route, just to provide a more predictable code. And so that, there's pros and cons to different approaches.
Makes sense. Thank you. And while I have the mic, I'm sure everybody else has noticed, but Dennis Maloney is still listed on the paperwork as opposed to Chris Lay.
That's how long we've been working on this, but yeah.
Yes, understood. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunt.
Yeah, I think for the reasons that most people have already said, I am also in support of this. I think it's really important, given that, with the change in the comprehensive plan and some, probably a lot of new stuff that's going to be coming in the future, that we give flexibility to both developers and to the city to be able to address things appropriately. And I'm, really sensitive to burdens on city staff. Having just, I know that they've been going through a lot, just having been familiar with the building department, doing house rebuilding, they can quickly get overtaxed. And so I think it's really important to provide, to get rid of redundancies. And as long as there's, it sounds to me like we can trust the city staff and the process that we do have in place to make sure that everything is being looked at appropriately. The people will still have to go through 2 hearings. So I am comfortable with this and will be in support.
Thank you, Commissioner Mahaley.
Yeah, I'm also in support of this change. I'm sensitive to the change in public engagement. I think that's very important for public engagement, but I think the conditions are appropriately defined such that larger, more substantial changes will still have the full process. And even with this change in place, you would still have two chances. And if you miss one, you'd still have a second to make comments. So I still think that there's adequate opportunity for public engagement. And I think the discretion language for the director in B3 is also important. And as Commissioner Choi said, we do have checks and balances in place. So I'm very much okay with leaving some wiggle room for judgment here. So yeah, generally in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Moline.
Yeah, I'm going to be in support of this. I was in December as well. And I'm glad to see that we're aligning the subdivision regs with the PUD change that we saw in December. So I'm in support, and for all of the reasons that other commissioners mentioned. And I'm not, I guess I'm very comfortable that we're not going to, that by making these changes, sort of the streamlining, that we're not gonna miss something. I'm feel confident that we're just not gonna miss anything. And our experience has been that at least my experience on the planning commission has been that when there's an issue that the public wants to come and speak on, they find a way to do that in timely fashion. So, but I'm sensitive to that as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think I would also point out in the past, when we've had people have to come in for both preliminary and final, really the only thing that comes up in the final is anything that's based on that additional information that they are then required to be providing us. And so all of that information is required to be provided to us if it's one of these streamlined approaches. So I don't feel like we're missing out on the opportunity to react to that fuller, more granular picture at that point in time. So I also find myself in favor of this at this time. And with that, I would entertain a motion with a condition.
So moved.
Thank you. And I believe staff has captured the condition to remove the words. What are they exactly?
Well, I'm sorry, Commissioner Troy.
So I was just going to say, yeah, that condition, from my opinion, was to remove the words extent, location, or type from section 1728-250B3.
And I believe there's the word "or" in there that has to be removed. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, and actually,
Extent,
it's just
location, or type.
or.
Yeah.
It's just the removal of the three words: the extent, location, or.
Great. Thank you. With that, I entertain a second.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Moline. Roll call, please.
Bangs,
Agree.
Commissioner Basket,
Yes.
Commissioner Choi,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahaley,
Yes.
Commissioner Moline,
Yes.
and Chair Brown Eyes.
Yes, motion carries. Mr. Post, thank you. Appreciate it. With that, then we will move into our second item of business, which is a discussion.
So yeah, thank you. I can quickly tee this up and then we're going to turn it over to our consultants. I did want to acknowledge that I neglected to introduce Matt, our new senior planner to Planning Commission. Matt, this is belated, but Matt's been with us for only a few months now and has been doing a great job, adding a ton of value to the group already. And you'll be seeing more of Matt in the near future. So welcome, Matt. We look forward to having him involved with the team. My quick tee up is for the comp plan discussion item is that the consultants will do a presentation and facilitate the discussion. The only thing I believe that is not in their presentation of note is that we did in your memo to this item summarize our anticipated number of meetings and sort of overall schedule for Planning Commission specifically over the next 18-month-ish. So if you wanted to look at that to get a sense of what kind of topics we anticipate coming to you for each of these meetings going into summer 2025-ish for adoption. And then also of note, the two questions that are in the memo in terms of the feedback we're asking you for tonight are going to be slightly different from what the consultant shares that were in the memo, but they're in general still about vision and values. So with that, I think that's all we had for the tee up. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Allison and or Jessica to run with things here.
Thank you.
Screen sharing privileges. We have a presentation to pop up. Thank you. Great. All right. Well, Allison's pulling that up. We are so excited to be with you tonight. I'm Jessica and joined by Allison, and she and I will run through our presentation with you. So really quickly tonight, there's three things that we wanted to talk with you about. We wanted to do an introduction to the comprehensive plan, describe a little bit about what we've been working on over the past number of weeks, and then really dig into, as Jeff said, a discussion on vision and values with you. Planning Commission holds a really important role within the comprehensive plan process. You are serving as our advisory group and really helping us as we work through this process. And so, as Jeff mentioned, we'll be meeting with you a few times through the process. And tonight we really want to focus in on vision and values. As you know, the last comprehensive plan was adopted in 2013, so over 10 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. Community demographics have changed, different national, state, local factors have occurred. So it's a really great and important time to be updating the comprehensive plan. So what is a comprehensive plan? This is a slide that you will likely see from us a number of times through the process, because we think it's really important to be clear about what a comprehensive plan is and what it is not. So the comprehensive plan is that strategic guidebook and long-range planning tool to help guide city policy decisions and priorities. So it will reflect the community's vision and goals and direct things and kind of what you want to do, everything from different policies to financing, how you want to prioritize action. It's also something that is required by state statute. So every community in Colorado is required to have a comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan is not zoning. So you just went through a really long conversation about your zoning code and PUD. That's not what a comprehensive plan is. It might help inform changes to your zoning, changes to your land use code, but it is not in and of itself zoning and land use standards. It's also not a detailed budget document, and it's not specific ordinance or requirements or regulations for other things. So it is that kind of high-level vision document. This is a slide based off of our previous conversation with you that we held really briefly in February, as well as our kickoff conversations with staff members working within the city. And so what do we want to achieve? What are some of the success factors as we think about an updated comprehensive plan for the city of Louisville? So we've heard multiple times that the plan needs to be clear, action-oriented, and really focused. And so that's something that we understand and have at the top of our list. We've also heard from you, as well as from City Council and staff, the importance of community engagement and really reaching broadly and doing our best as a consultant team to make sure that we're getting out in as many ways as possible to hear from as many segments of the community as possible. We've also heard that it's important to think about kind of catalyst sites, areas where there might be revitalization, as well as areas potentially of preservation. We've heard specifically the importance of sustainability and resilience within the comprehensive plan. And then we've heard the importance of partnerships to make sure that as we move forward and we're thinking about how to implement the comprehensive plan, that there are partnerships there to really move it forward. So that's what we've heard so far. So what have we been working on for the past few months? There's been a lot of things happening behind the scenes, and we just wanted to give you a high-level overview of that before we dive into conversation. So the overall schedule is really divided into 4 different segments. We are in vision and trends, kind of understanding Louisville right now. And we are here getting ready next week for some community visioning pop-ups and an open house. We've also been working through some plan reviews and existing conditions assessment. So this period of time lasts until about May. And then we move into identifying things like a land use strategy and framework, thinking about priorities into the summer, and then really working through plan drafting in the fall and into early spring of next year. So your role, as I mentioned, we have a number of meetings anticipated with you. February, we did just high-level project introduction and tried to understand and hear from you your aspirations and goals for the plan and the process. Tonight, we're here to talk with you about vision and values. And then we will be coming back to you probably in May to talk through existing conditions and trends. Then we'll be moving into future framework and the strategies and implementation for meetings 4 through 7. So we have worked with staff to create a project brand, beginning to update the Engage Louisville website and have some initial information there. So our project launch has really happened online, and as we move into community engagement next week, it'll be maybe a more active kind of project launch. But you'll see this logo and these colors throughout the process, and that's how you can tell that it is related to the comprehensive plan. I would also highlight you can direct anyone who might have questions about the process. What are we doing? How can I find out information? You can direct them to the Engage Louisville website. That will continue to be updated throughout the process with project information, FAQs, all the reports and studies that we're doing as well. So we have taken some time to dig into detail on understanding your past plan. So we understand Louisville, but we have not been involved in the planning processes as much as you all have. And so part of making sure that we as your consultant team really understand the foundation that we're working from, we wanted to dig into some of these existing plans. So we've gone through and read these 10 plans here, and that just really helps provide a great basis for us as we move forward to make sure that we're building off of the past work in the comprehensive plan update rather than duplicating any efforts. We've also begun some initial community engagement. So in December, we had targeted focus groups and conversations, 11 different topics over 3 days. And we do have a summary of those conversations and some of what we heard available on the Engage Louisville website, and kind of link here. And for folks at home, you can check out the QR code, should take you there. But this was a really important way for us to get a foundational understanding of what some members of the community think about some of these key topics that are related to the comprehensive plan and growth and development within the community. And in a little bit, Allison will talk in a little bit more detail about what we've heard from some of those conversations. We are also in the process right now working with our partners at Spirit, EPS, and Fair and Peers to craft our existing conditions assessment. So this will be a map package as well as memos related to the environment and sustainability, transportation, and then a market analysis and growth potential. Because of the great work that the city is already doing on housing, we're integrating the work on the housing study and not duplicating that effort. So that's an example of trying to use the work that you're already doing. And so we are working through revisions to those, and we anticipate having final drafts available for you, and we would be presenting those to you in our next meeting in late April or early May. And we hope this is not news to you, but we are really excited. We will be in Louisville next week for some meetings and an open house. So March 21st at the Rec and Senior Center from 5:30 to 7:30, we have a community open house. We also have a survey that is live and taking comments and feedback from the community. And the open house next week, as well as the survey, are really focused on vision and values and trying to understand from the community what some priorities are. So we hope that you all will be able to attend and make sure to share that with your networks. The open house is interactive. There's not a formal presentation. What we have found in many communities that we work in is having an opportunity for some more one-on-one conversation and really answering key questions and being able to walk through different stations is a great and effective way to hear detailed comments and really make sure we're hearing from members of the community. So we'll have a short running presentation to learn about the project, and then we'll have specific stations that include questions and mapping. And we'll give stamps on a passport, and folks will be entered to win a gift card. So we're really excited and hope that folks will find it as fun as we find them. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison to run through a little bit of what we heard in those focus groups, and then we'll dive into discussion with you all.
Thank you, Jess. Great. Well, just to kind of reiterate what Jess mentioned earlier, we met with you, or we kind of listened in and participated in the conversation back in February, and we heard from you similarly to what we heard from staff, that this needs to be a really usable document, that we need to engage the community in meaningful ways, that we support the parallel efforts such as the housing assessment and the downtown plan, which are currently going on, and that sustainability and equity is really woven throughout the plan. And so I think that we've heard that from staff, we've heard that from focus groups, and now reinforced with all of you. And so we will use these as milestones moving forward and continue to check back in to make sure that we are hitting these objectives as we go through this planning process. What was really interesting from the last conversation was understanding your concerns, what the top issues are for this plan to address. So we heard that there's tension in the community around growth, and that finding a balance between retail, commercial, mixed use, the different types of housing, while maintaining that sense of community, is a really critical factor for the comprehensive plan to address. And we've heard that there's some concern about the growth and change that's happening and how that might influence community character. And so this comprehensive plan is an opportunity to come together around what those shared values are in order to direct growth in a meaningful way. In Louisville, as well as across the country, throughout the state of Colorado, housing affordability and attainability is really a key issue. And the housing assessment is a really great framework, a really great directive for how we consider this within the comprehensive plan. And so we'll ensure that those two pieces are really working together moving forward. And finally, we know that there's some different issues depending on where you are in town. So downtown has a different character compared to Red Tail Bridge or McCaslin Boulevard. We've heard about some of the potential future development that might happen in the south of Louisville. And so these are things that we need to think about, different character areas throughout the community. So with that, we'd like to evolve the conversation moving. We've talked about critical success factors. We've talked about top issues. We're going to continue to hear from the community on this next week, but we wanted to use our time tonight with two questions. So the first is, how do you currently use the comprehensive plan? What has worked well, and how this might update, how this update might support decision-making in the future. So this is a question really unique and special to the Planning Commission, because you work with the comprehensive plan in a different way than the general community or development community might. You're really using this as a tool to support the decision-making processes when certain land use decisions come for review. So we're curious to spend a little bit of time of how this plan, how you're currently using the plan, and how a future update might be able to support you in that, in the role that you play. And the second is, we'll share the current vision and values, and we want to know what resonates from the 2013 vision and values, what's important to hold on to, what still rings true, and what maybe has shifted given, a decade's worth of time, that all the economic shifts, changes in population, changes from within the community that we might want to reconsider as we move into this next stage. So I do have a copy of those on the screen. These are the comprehensive plan core values. I also have a link that you can go to. It's page 13 and 14, I think, of the comprehensive plan that's currently online. So that you can see them in more detail. And we're also asking this question to the broad community through the open houses, as well as on the survey. We really want to understand broadly, do these vision core value statements ring true, or do we need to move forward in a different way? So I'm going to transition from a discussion on PowerPoint to using a tool called Mural. You all do not need to participate in the mural. I will use it more like if we were in the room with you, Jess and I would be flip charting with our colored markers so that we can capture your feedback and you can see your comments. But since we're not in the room with you, this is kind of like our virtual flip chart so that we can capture all the comments in one place. You can see how we've captured those comments. Let us know if if we've written it down correctly, and read and respond to others. So I'm going to share that and we can dive into conversation. I'd like to start with question 1. And so I've got that on my screen. Let's open it up for discussion. How do you currently use the comprehensive plan? What's worked well for you with that? And where could this plan make some improvements?
Chair, do you want us to just engage in this discussion, or do you want to recognize? Yeah,
No,
okay.
We'll try to make it as free flowing as possible. If you want, anybody can raise their hands and I'll just try to work my way through the group, but go ahead, Commissioner Moline. Thanks.
Yeah, one thing I guess I would say that I have used the current comprehensive plan in particular to help me as I'm doing reviews of land use proposals that we've seen before the Planning Commission. And so I find the document can be very helpful even in rather kind of specific land use applications sometimes. I also sometimes find that just sort of the general sense of what at that time in 2013, I guess it was, how the community viewed the various things. So I do use it. I use it as a way to sort of remind myself of what people valued, and I try and bring that to my analysis of land use applications. One of the things I guess I'm wondering about in terms of what maybe could change is just hearing even some of the public comments we heard tonight. Is there ways maybe to prioritize some of these values? We heard, for example, from right at the beginning of our meeting today about a person who's concerned about climate and sustainability. And I guess I'm kind of curious, do we have, could there be a way that helps us think of some of those things as being more important than perhaps other values? I don't know. I'm just curious what other people think about that. I can see those coming up in many of our future development reviews.
Yeah, to the point where actually we used to have and I'll have to dig that out. It was kind of a ranked list of not from within the comprehensive plan, but right, you'd have Louisville Municipal Code, something like that at the top. And then somewhere in there, we'd have IDDSG, CDDSG, downtown plan. And then I think the comp plan was typically pretty low on that list of documents as far as what took priority from a legal perspective. And I think for me, at least, one of the challenges with the comp plan in the past is so much of the language is often aspirational. At that point, then trying to enforce or rely on language that's aspirational as a kind of a determining factor, there's a disconnect there. So that can be one of the challenges of it. Continuing on, additional commissioners.
Chair, I'll
Troy.
make a comment.
Great, thanks.
I think similar to Commissioner Moline, I've used the plan in the past to give overall context to where the city was at some point with regard to some of the things that we've seen come through Planning Commission about where residents and business owners want to see the city go. And it's good it's good to give context to all of that, right? We are in our city with all of the buildings and land uses and all of the things that we have because somebody at some point wanted to make a change and go through development. I think part of what I see as the value of the 2012, 2013 plan right now is almost giving context to how much things can change in a very short period of time with regard to the overall life of the city. Being city being, what now, I guess 135, 140 years old. That seems like a long time. And some of the things that are in the 2013 plan are things that we no longer talk about on a recurring basis right now. And so, they were important at the time. They got a lot of emphasis. They got a lot of effort in terms of how they were developed and what they included. And so I think using that as context for making sure that we're trying to have as forward of a thinking look as possible as we go into this one. I just want to recognize that even the things that we think are very important right now and the focuses of this comprehensive plan may not necessarily be where the city is going to be in another 10 years in terms of priorities. So
I'm curious, you brought up a really interesting point about things that are no longer relevant. I'm curious, do you have anything in particular that you might be able to point to regarding that?
I don't remember the specific sections, that were kind of I think they were called not focuses or highlighted sections, something. But there were ones that focused on specifically like special districts and one about neighborhood, or maybe it wasn't even called neighborhood development. My memory's failing me right now on it,
Okay.
but
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
I was just curious.
There were some of those things where when I read through it the first time, I thought, oh wow, I've never heard that come up in any city meetings or any discussions or any applications.
I think what you might be referring to, initially it was thought that we would have small area plans, and then within all of the small area plans, there would be multiple neighborhood plans. That was never pushed through to that result. So is that maybe what you're referring to, Commissioner Troy?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part
of that.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, just also as a note, we have only 3 people joining us as attendees in the public. I kind of like to weave their feedback since it's a small group. If it was a large group of people, I don't know that we could accommodate that. But I would like to welcome them if they'd like to raise their hand, and then we can weave you in here in the discussion. That said, any additional commissioner thoughts, discussions to this question number 1?
Because I don't, because we haven't been on the
Sure,
committee and used
understandable,
it.
yes.
As a new member, I have not used it, so I don't have a whole lot of comment on that.
All right, Commissioner Bangs.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, similarly, obviously I'm familiar with the comprehensive plan, but I haven't had to lean on it directly in this capacity before, but obviously it's going to be a key guide for all of us going forward. I did want to thank the consultants. That the top issues slide, I think, really did capture the essence of kind of the general community concerns that I'm aware of. So I thought that was a good summary. I did also pick up in terms of the prep doc, particular emphasis on those that are hard to reach or typically don't engage. Thank you for that. I am very concerned that the silent majority won't participate as actively as we need them to, and the vocal minority potentially will. And so I'm interested to understand just how determined and proactive you can be in ensuring this is as balanced demographically as possible. I did see the mention of engaging with community groups, including Boulder Valley School District. I don't know whether that means BVSD at the high level, or whether it really means active participation in the classroom. Because I think if we can engage the kids, the parents will be more compelled to participate than they might otherwise be. So I'm just curious as to how proactive you will be. Open house is great. Yard signs are great, but we know there's a certain group that will speak up and participate, and there'll be others that have valid opinions and inputs that, unless they're, dare I say, cajoled, won't necessarily be as involved as we need them to be.
Thank you. I see Ms. Krantz raised her hand. If we can unmute her. And then we'll jump back to commissioners.
I wanted to make a general comment on the whole process. I'm wondering if you're looking for my answer to question number 1, or this is my opportunity for general comments.
In general, I was just hoping to include you all, if you wanted to be, in questions number 1 and questions number 2. I'm not sure. I think the public open house next week, I think, is probably the more wider area to be able to discuss those big issues.
Okay, I have a question. I have a bigger issue that's more broad than question number 1.
Okay.
I'm hoping I can comment when you're done this process, or I can go ahead right now.
Short and sweet. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, sure. I have a problem with the focus group summary. One of the key takeaways was that participants noted that there's a certain segment of the community and groups that have been obstructive to future growth. I would challenge that. I mean, maybe I would be considered one of those segments of the community that's considered to be obstructive. Or, as Commissioner Mohali said, maybe you might consider me the vocal minority, though I don't feel that's an accurate characterization. But I might say, I would want to turn that around and say in the focus group summary that there's a certain community, a segment of the community, and people who are even external to this community that are incredibly pro-growth. So I gave a list to Jeff Hurt of community groups that were not included, important stakeholders that were not included in that focus group summary. And I don't know if he's passed that on to the consultant to let them know that I gave him the contact people for about 6 different community organizations that are grassroots. They are not a vocal minority, but represent large parts of our community that they might want to speak to. So I also have a comment on the housing study and some general comments. Will I have another opportunity tonight?
So no, we're really just trying to keep it focused on question 1 and question 2.
Okay. Okay.
But I think there'll probably be more opportunity at the open house.
Okay, no more opportunity tonight to let you know what my issue, a couple things. I just hope that you guys will ask for a statistically valid survey. And I finally just want to say I really love the comment that came in the beginning, and that Commissioner Moline acknowledged that we do need to prioritize the values. And I think that it would be great to have a statistically valid survey and ask community members how much they value the biodiversity and climate issue, because I thought that was really important that was brought up, and I appreciate that Commissioner Moline thought so as well.
Great.
I'll provide you written comments because I can tell you I don't want to kick you guys off track.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Definitely. Commissioner Mahaley.
Thank you, Chair. Making my first comments here. I'm also echoing that I'm also new to the party, so I haven't used the comprehensive plan in this forum. But I wanted to echo also your comment earlier, Chair Brunhouse, about the aspirational language, which is good and important. But I think we need to make sure that we have actionable goals identified. Even if not, this is, as was said, capturing where we're at in 2024. Maybe these goals become, overcome by events and years to follow, but at least capturing what the goals are for the next period of time, when it comes to these big issues like climate growth and revitalization. I think if we can capture and formulate actionable goals, I think that would better facilitate a positive movement towards the things that we identify as being important. So I'm not saying we can't have aspirational language, to characterize what's important. But but if it's not actionable, I think I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. So I think, that's harder to get to that point, but I think we need to make sure that we have the momentum here in this process to do so. I also really like the idea of making sure the survey is statistically relevant. I did see the survey was released. I actually have already filled it out, so I did like the questions, and I think there was even an opportunity to rank, sort of, or at least evaluate the level of importance of several of these issues. So I thought that was a very good thing to include. So thank you for doing so. I did have one question, and I think I saw this as the end of 2023. But can our consultants describe more of how? And maybe this is in the summary and I can just go back and read it, but who is in the focus groups? How are they advertised? What can you tell us about the focus groups and their composition? Thank you.
Yeah, so focus groups are intended to be topically based, and they generally follow the plan elements of a comprehensive plan. And so it's an opportunity for us to meet with subject matter experts. So I think transportation is always a good example. We're meeting with RTD, local transportation engineers, with different people who have different roles within the realm of transportation. And it allows us to ask more detailed, in-depth questions around a certain topical area to help frame the baseline understanding and baseline assessments that Jessica shared earlier on in the presentation. So it's really an opportunity for us to listen and learn, whereas the community open house is our opportunity to listen and learn from the broad community about all of the different topics within the comprehensive plan. So it's more broad, and we really do welcome everyone who's on this call. The comments, we're looking forward to listening and hearing more from you in the coming weeks. And next week at the open house, in addition, we will have some pop-up events. There is a comment about how we are engaging the youth. We're going to be at the library doing a pop-up event at the story time. And we're looking at some other opportunities to really, not necessarily, the open house is where the community comes to us. Pop-up events are our opportunity to go out into the community and try and capture people who aren't typically engaged, or target certain populations based on where we're setting up, such as library story time. So it kind of works both ways. And then we also have the survey, which mirrors some of those questions. That survey is for people who maybe don't feel as comfortable engaging one-on-one. Some people feel more comfortable sharing their ideas online. So we want to try and create a lot of different ways and different opportunities to ask questions so that people can provide responses in a format that's comfortable for them.
So regarding that survey, are you tracking like the number of responses? I guess I understand the survey is anonymous, but what are you able to track, numbers or
Yes.
the type,
Yes.
are you,
so
go ahead.
We are tracking the total numbers.
Okay.
So again, just as a point of order, trying to keep a focus on question 1 here at some point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Basket.
So I was going to react to the second question, specifically, how might this update support decision making?
Can we hold on that until we wrap?
All right, sure.
No, just to keep it clear as far as moving around on the screen and all that. Commissioner Moline.
I think she means the second part of the first question.
Oh, is that what you mean? Question 1?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how might this update support decision-making in the future? It might support decision-making in the future. Obviously, we want to come to some conclusions about what's important, and we'll use housing as the red herring. If we want to add housing and that's more dense, or that changes something about the existing community character, that may be what the plan reflects, but I wonder if there's a way to capture if there are differing viewpoints around that, so that we can help council ultimately struggle through the decisions they have to make in terms of approvals. That's all I have.
All right, Commissioner Mahaley, should we bounce back to you?
Yeah, because I think it builds on Commissioner Baskett's comments. So in terms of how we can use it in the future, to use her example of housing. So, it was cited that growth is a contentious and that will be a spirited discussion. So if we can identify and agree on ways that we could address housing while addressing the character of our community issues and sense of community. So if we can find ways where we can add housing while still taking a systematic approach, strategically add housing and ways to help protect the things that we value that define our character. I think outlining that process of here's what matters. When we say small town character, here's what we mean, and here's what we're going to try to protect. And therefore, with that in mind, here are some ways that we could add some housing, if that's possible. And so having that conversation through that lens, I think would be productive and would help with the future decision making. So yeah, just building on what Deborah said, that's sort of my interpretation of what I would like to see in this plan.
Thank you both. Yeah, Commissioner Moline.
Yeah, I'll just build on that for a second too. I mean, to me, sticking with that same example, I could see people saying, well, we're addressing our climate goals and our sustainability goals by having housing and by proposing housing that's denser and in taller, like that does something different with height limits and those kinds of things. So it'll be really interesting to see if the I guess it'd be great if the comprehensive plan could give us some guidance on, how do you weigh some of those values. And then I wanted to also just echo what a number of you said about the past plan and its aspirational qualities. And so, and I'm thinking there about some of the comments that it had, if I'm remembering this right, the small areas that in 2013 were really important to the community, but there was a lot of stuff in the plan that really didn't, that we just weren't able to follow through with. And I guess I want to make sure that we end up with a comprehensive plan that's comprehensive enough, obviously, but simple and realistic, and one that's, as we've all spoken about, kind of actionable. So I appreciate it and want to echo those comments of fellow commissioners. So thanks.
Thank you.
If I might jump in and maybe help to transition us to the next question, if you all are ready. I wanted to add on one of the points. So right now we're discussing vision and values, and that's really the umbrella or the lens that we'll look through this process with. And so we'll dive into that a little bit more in the next question. But I'm really excited to work with all of you as we move into what comes after vision and values, which is understanding different growth scenarios and trade-offs. And so it's really a lot of what you're talking about this is setting the framework of what's important, what are the community's values, and how do we use that as a lens to discuss what does the future look like. And that is a series of different potential scenarios and understanding the trade-offs. So to your point, if sustainability is a high value, how does that affect housing and transportation in order to integrate that into, the future vision framework for the community? And then conversely, if you grow in a different way, what is the trade-off with that important value? And so that's what that second phase of work will really dig into and explore in more depth. And so I wanted to pause to say yes, and I'm really excited to work with you all on that. And right now we're focused on what's important, and then that will lead to additional engagement in the summer, which is that next phase of work, that third phase, which is really exploring community choices, trade-offs, and different growth scenarios.
Great. Thank you. I think that helps frame some things there. Did anybody else want to respond directly to question number 1 right now, or are we ready to move on? Actually, why don't we take 5 minutes? Yeah, reconvene at 8:20 sharp. And then we can move on to question 2. Great, thanks. Great, thank you all. Welcome back. Question number 2. We can just open it up to commission and And if, again, here, if any of the three attendees want to join in on question number 2 itself, limited to that, you are welcome to raise your hands. Commissioner Hunt.
Get myself in the beginning this time. You know, I was struck when reading this list of core community values, how relevant they still are. However many years later we are. I mean, most of these are ones that I would put really high on my list, and I think most of my neighbors and friends who I talk to would also. Particularly the sense of community, the livable small town feel, healthy, vibrant, and sustainable economy, connection to heritage. We have sustainability on here. So I do think that I don't think that, in my view, I don't think that the core community values have changed all that much. And I think there's a lot here that's workable. I think obviously it's missing some of the sort of affordability pieces and attainability. That kind of, to me, kind of goes with the livable small town concept. Like, you know, making sure that for the future that we are working towards, you know, what does livability mean and to this community, and how does affordability and attainability of housing relate to that? I think those are really important. But you know, I do think that the values that we have are worth preserving. Most of these, I mean, all of them really, in some form or another. And so that's what I was struck with when I was reading this.
Maybe we can add to this question, are there any that don't resonate as well? So we kind of get both sides of the spectrum.
I mean, I think in some sense they all resonate, at least to me.
Yeah.
And I think what's different now, 15 or so years later, for me, is the way that we attain these values is probably very different than we might have done in the past. It's a different world. And I think that's maybe sort of where, you know, affordability kind of comes into the livable small town feel. I don't think people were thinking of that in the same way because, you know, in 2012, it still felt relatively affordable, all things being relative, of course, in living near Boulder. But it did feel relatively affordable in ways that it does not now to people. And so, you know, I think how we attain these values, I think, is going to be where this plan can really, you know, help us modernize and think through how we want to. But I actually think the values, at least in my view, all of them are still valuable and are why many of us want to live here.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that thought too. Commissioner Choi.
Thanks, Chair. It's interesting, you know, looking back through these again after freshly taking the survey, how they were plucked on there, right? And the rankings from the 0 to 5 in the survey to assess how relevant these still are. I would agree with Commissioner Hunt. I think a lot of these core values very much are still applicable, and you know, I'm at the risk of sacrificing my anonymity, right? I think all of these in the survey I've put at, you know, a 4 or a 5 still. And the couple of ones that I also, you know, think are relevant and added in as well that aren't represented here are things like sustainable growth and just addressing that as both contextually, right, as sustainable growth and as something that is necessary to look at for the future, because, you know, and right, we look at the housing plan, the data from, you know, 10 years ago, back when this 2013 plan was applicable, the growth was very minimal, right? We had very few people moving into town during that time compared to the trajectories that we've had over the last 5 years, and focusing on that kind of stuff sustainably, not just from an environmental sustainability perspective, but from a, you know, a pragmatic, just do we have enough land? Do we have enough resources? Do we have enough, you know, infrastructure? You know, that definition of sustainable as well. I think that that's something important to consider for the future as well. And another thing that isn't necessarily listed on here right now, that goes along with that growth, as it pertains to additional population, is an increase in the availability and offering of city services in general, right? Back in 2013, we had fewer fire stations, we had fewer city services, we had just even fewer offerings related to the old rec center that was there, right? All of those things. So consideration of additional city services and how the growth accommodates that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. If we can invite Ms. Krantz at this time to address question 2 by unmuting her.
Thanks so much for allowing the public to participate in this process. I am loving hearing everything that you are saying, and I really appreciated what the commissioners all said so far, especially Commissioner Hunt. I went through and took the survey, and I also wanted to give everything a 5. And then I thought, well, maybe I could go back and move a couple things back to number 4. I thought they were all important, and I completely agree that that one thing that is missing and has changed as I've learned about the housing study and how much it costs to live here, is that we need more affordability and more diversity. And so I would agree that is one point, and maybe inclusivity to add to this list. But I really think all these values, when I took the survey, thought all these values still stand. And I'm glad you were able to take my hand again, because I just wanted to apologize, because when I spoke earlier, I said that Commissioner Mulholly used the term the vocal minority, but he did not say that, and I apologize for that. So thanks. I'm glad you took my comment again. Thank you.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned, it's because we're such a small group today in particular. Can't promise it always, but might as well run with it while we can. Commissioner Banks, certainly.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll own up to using the phrase vocal minority, but I also reference silent majority too. So hopefully we can encompass and accommodate both. Yeah, I agree with all the comments made so far. I think the challenge, as we discussed before when this was on the agenda last meeting, is striking a balance. I'm picking out some of the words here, a strong and supportive business climate, and at the same time, innovative, sustainable practices. And so I think the EV topic we had just a month ago was a good example of trying to strike a balance of achieving sustainability, which is critical, but at the same time, not having such onerous requirements that we're considered too unfriendly for investment in the city. The other one, as Ms. Krantz just pointed out, that families and individuals section speaks to me, but that's covering a lot of bases too, and the affordability. I know the consultants went to great pains to say that they're working in parallel with the housing needs assessment and housing survey. But this comprehensive plan, clearly has to address that major problem that we face as a community. So that one is embedded in there under families and individuals, but probably is more important now than it certainly was 10 years ago, to some of the comments already made. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Mahaley.
Thank you. I want to also echo that I resonated with Commissioner Hunt's comments about the timeless relevancy of so many of these values. I completely agree with that. Addressing the second part of the question here, what is important to consider for the future? And I think, especially as we enter the heavier community engagement phase of this process, I think we need to get ahead of so often we're in meetings and we hear public comment and even our own comments about the small town character of Louisville. And so I think we need to really address what that means to people, because I think that means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and I'm not so convinced it's consistent. And certainly the language there, small town charm, certainly seems to suggest the livable small town feel, but I think it's a lot more than that. So as we're going through and maybe, maybe adding to the survey somehow, or maybe we can lift this answer from the survey, but when people say small town charm, what exactly do they mean? Is it just the traffic? Is it, the fact that they can go to the restaurant and get a table? Is it, not, the ability to park? What exactly are they getting at? Because I think that addressing those issues will help us achieve our goals better, because it's one thing everyone seems to agree on is the term small town character, and we use it all the time, myself included, but I think it's a term that everyone uses that means different things to different people. So I think we need to address that.
I think that's really astute, John. I appreciate that comment.
Thank you both. Yes. Can we welcome Ms. Smith to the discussion by unmuting her?
Hello, thank you for taking our comments and allowing us to participate tonight. I wanted to share some of the things that I was sort of relieved to see were part of the 2013 plan, and that I hope will be part of the new plan. I think that open space shows up, our open space and parks show up in the plan. They're relatively low down, but interestingly, last city council meeting I was at, where they announced the winners of the photography contest, I would say about 75% of the pictures were pictures of open space. And so I don't know whether people consciously recognize how much they identify the city and the character of the city. I think is really interwoven with our open spaces and our agricultural spaces, as well as our well-developed spaces. So I wanted to speak up a little bit about that. And I personally think one of the biggest challenges the city faces is revitalization of the McCaslin area, parts of South Boulder Road. We're not unique in having a lot of vacant spaces, but it is kind of giving a rundown to me, kind of feel of the city. And also actually on Main Street right now, we have a fair amount of vacancy. So, I think that's an important part of what needs to be done. And I think of it as part of the sustainability as well. Because instead of developing raw land, if we reuse or repurpose areas that have already been developed, then I think we're getting more bang for our buck. And then I think an elephant in the room for the city, and I frankly doubt that there's a way to change this trend, but I think what's happening is what I call extreme gentrification. And I don't see it as we can maybe slow it. I don't know how we possibly could stop it. But I predict that the character of the city changes considerably over the next decade. And those are just my thoughts. And thanks you again, Steve, for allowing us to participate.
You're very welcome. Thank you all. Commissioner Basket.
My comments have to do with what's important to consider in the next generation of the comp plan. I think that we need to answer the question, how much can Louisville grow and still retain its small town feel? That implies that there's a simple metric in there, and we've already had some more complex discussion around what does it mean to have a small town feel. So I think that that's going to be a critical thing to wrestle with. I think that we need to think about how the comp plan can facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have that woven into many of the other documents that the city is working on, but that was not a popular field of interest at the time this comp plan was written. That's all I have for right now.
Great, thank you. Any additional thoughts or, and then, Allison, is there anything you wanted to kind of prompt, or Jessica, any additional?
I think that this was a great discussion. I think there's several things that have been brought up that are really good. So it sounds to me, just kind of to summarize what I'm hearing, all of these community values are still really guiding. They're still important for the future, with the addition of DEI and affordability. And I really like the suggestion to better understand what small town means. I agree with you. It might mean different things to different people. And perhaps we can discuss with Jeff and his team, adding a question like that to the open house. I think it's an excellent suggestion, and would love to get some broader input on it.
Great, thank you. Are you comfortable with this being a wrap then on these two questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think this has been a great conversation. If you have anything to add, we're open to it, but we just really thank you all for some really wonderful feedback and look forward to more.
Commissioner Mullin.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm, thank you. My question is just again around, I agree with everything that all the commissioners said. I think these are all important. I'm wondering if there's a need or not to sort of overarch some of these, like some of these, and maybe prioritize these a little bit. So anyway, just a thought, is there something that we want to emphasize? I don't know. I'm just curious whatever others might think about that. So
Or is that prioritization something we want to sort of get input from the community on in these open?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that's where
very true.
we each individually may have our own priorities. I think it'd be
Right.
really helpful before we create a list to hear what the community really thinks.
Yes. Exactly, Commissioner Hunt. I'm wondering if there's room for that, or if that sort of concept makes sense as we move forward with this. So anyway, yeah.
I like that suggestion. I think the way that the survey question and the engagement questions are structured might allow us to see which, if there's certain of these that are rising to the top or some that are falling below. And our next meeting with all of you will be to review those existing conditions as well as findings from this broad community engagement, as well as the survey. And I'd love to circle back on this question based on what sort of findings we hear, and talk with all of you about how do these values inform the plan. Because as I mentioned earlier, this is the lens through which we will look at scenario planning, the criteria for what's important when it comes to trade-offs and choices about how you grow.
Great. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for participation in this. I think it's a wrap then.
Thank you all.
All right, great. Moving on then, we'll just move into, are there any commissioner comments? Any subject of the day? Seeing none, I'd open it up to staff comments.
No comments from us?
All right, excellent. Noting we do have one a housing plan final draft scheduled for next month's meeting. What are you looking for at that point? Are we going to be reviewing it word for word? I hope not.
Yeah, it'll be a presentation of the final draft, kind of proceeding, going to city council. This will be a city council adopted policy. And so we don't know yet exactly how that conversation is going to be structured, but it'll be your evaluation of the final draft.
So, okay, so actually I'll bite my tongue and take those words back. It could be a word for word review of this. Are you going to be asking us to vote on it?
Rob jumped in. You may have.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to be available if there are questions. Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is I don't know yet for sure. If it was a comprehensive plan, certainly for the comprehensive plan, Planning Commission is codified as a recommending body to City Council. And even if there's a comp plan amendment, this would not be that. So There's not a codified rule for planning commission to vote on this, but as this, housing plan will have a lot of implications on things in your wheelhouse, we at minimum want your feedback, and input to be relayed to council. I don't know exactly how that'll be structured though, sorry.
Okay, great. Thanks. I think we can run with that for now. With that, then I would entertain a motion to end the meeting. Recess.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Moline,
And second.
Commissioner Choi with the second, all in favor.
Aye.
Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you all again next month.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Yeah.